What if the beliefs you've spent your whole life calling good were never yours to begin with? Somewhere in your childhood, someone handed you a list. Be humble, be selfless, suffering builds character, success means helping others. You didn't write that list, you didn't even choose to receive it. It arrived just like how the weather actually arrives through parents, teachers, religions, the culture humming down around you before you could even start speaking. And by the time you were actually old enough to go ahead and question it, you, ladies and gentlemen, already started calling it yours. This is the question that opens one of the most dangerous books ever written. Not dangerous because it tells you what to think, dangerous because it asks you to notice that you never really had a choice to think in the first place. The book I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is called Beyond Good and Evil. The author is Friedrich Nietzsche, a 19th century philosopher who spent his life doing something almost nobody has the stomach for. He looked directly at the moral instincts everyone around him treated as obvious, and he asked, where did these actually come from? Not are they true, where did they come from? Because for Nietzsche, those are two very fundamental different questions, and confusing them is how entirely civilizations sleepwalk through their own values without ever waking up. He wrote this book alone in mountain towns, half blind, in physical pain most of his adult life. And what he produced wasn't a new moral code to replace the old one, it was something stranger, a mirror held up to morality itself. Here's why it still matters. Ladies and gentlemen, we live inside the most inherited beliefs than any generation before us about success, about happiness, about what a good life even looks like. And we've never had less time to actually examine any one of them. Nietzsche isn't offering advice, he is actually offering a method for interrogating the ground you are actually currently standing on. And let's decode it one thought at a time. Start with the idea that gives us the book its title. Nietzsche noticed something strange. Almost every moral system draws a hard line between good and evil, but almost nobody stops to ask who drew that line or why it happened to fall exactly where it does. Trace any moral instinct back far enough, and you will find it wasn't handed down from the sky. It was built by people in a particular time, usually to solve a particular problem. And once you see that, a harder question actually follows. If someone built a wall between good and evil, whose interests did the wall actually protect? This is where Nietzsche makes his most famous and most misread move. He describes two different origins for morality. One he calls the master morality. It emerges from people who feel strong and self directed, and for them, good simply means what expresses strength and vitality, while bad just means what's weak or small. Then there's the slave morality, and I think this is quoted more often than before. Born among people who feel oppressed, powerless, or unable to act. And for them, ladies and gentlemen, morality actually flips because now good means humility, resistant, and self sacrifice, the qualities of someone who can't fight back. And evil becomes anything that resembles the strength their oppressors have. Notice what Nietzsche is not saying. He's not saying that the strong are good people and the weak are bad people. He's not handing out a ranking. He is essentially describing where two entirely different value systems come from and pointing out that most of us in the modern world inherited the second one, even or ever without being told that there was a first one that fundamentally existed. This is the part people get wrong constantly. They hear master and slave morality and assume Nisha is cheering for domination, for stepping on people. Look, he isn't. He's diagnosing something more unsettling, that a morality built by the powerless to survive the powerful can outlive the conditions that actually created it in the first place and keep functioning long enough before anyone actually remembers why. think about how often you've praised someone for staying humble while quietly feeling something was off, like the humility wasn't confidence, it was fear just wearing a nicer outfit. Think about workplace where ambition gets treated with suspicion, where the person who wants more is actually seen as the problem and the person who wants nothing is seen as virtuous. Nietzsche would ask, is that virtue or is that a value system built by people who needed ambition to look dangerous so that the powerful would leave them alone? Here's the insight that should sit with you. Not every moral instinct in your head is actually a discovery about what's actually the truth. Some of them are just inherited survival strategies from people who are no longer in the room, and you, ladies and gentlemen, are still living by their emergency plan. If morality isn't handed down from nowhere, then something has to explain why humans keep building these systems in the first place. Nietzsche's answer is one of the most controversial ideas in the entire history of philosophy: the will to power. Strip away the melodrama the phases has picked up over the decades, and the core claim is almost very mundane. Nietzsche believed that underneath hunger, underneath the drive to survive, underneath even the surge of happiness, there's something more basic driving all of these living things, which is the urge to grow, to expand, to exert influence on the world rather than simply endure it. Look at a child learning to walk. Nobody has to bribe them with a reward. They fall again and again and get back, not because somebody's actually clapping for them, but because something in them wants to do that one thing. That that's the will to power in the rarest form that we could possibly see as human beings, not domination. The drive to actualize capacity, right? Now watch what happens to the drive in adulthood. It's getting rerouted, it's getting redirected, and sometimes buried or killed entirely by people around you. And I don't have to say this, ladies and gentlemen, you actually felt this. As I'm speaking to you, I know it is running in your head, right? The job where your competence quietly threatens someone's, so you learn to actually shrink it. The friend group where wanting too much gets read or rewarded as arrogance, so you actually learn to want less out aloud. Nisha's claim is that this isn't neutral. Suppressing the drive doesn't make it disappear altogether, it makes it turn inward, curdling into anxiety, self doubt, or a simmering resistance or resentment you can't quite name. This is where the philosophy gets practical in a way almost nobody actually expects. The will to power isn't the permission to dominate other people. It's actually a diagnostic question you can ask yourself in any moment of hesitation. Am I holding back right now because this is genuinely not right for me, or because I've been trained to believe that wanting this thing is actually inappropriate? Most people never separate those two feelings. They feel identical from the inside. Nietzsche is one of the few thinkers who actually insists you to learn to tell them apart. And there is only the ongoing, unfinished labor of building one, value by value, choice by choice, each one tested honestly against your own actual experience of living rather than accepted because it arrived pre approved by everyone else around you. The greatest obstacle, ladies and gentlemen, to living an authentic life was never the world outside you, it was never other people, and it was never external circumstances. It was the beliefs you never once thought to actually go ahead and question, the ones so old, so familiar, so deeply worn into the architecture of your mind that you stopped recognizing them as beliefs at all and started calling them simply yourself. That's the thought I'm going to leave you with.